Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, March 29th. For your agenda this week, Monday, we're working on food chain and web notes. Tuesday, we have ecosystems, vocab, quiz, and homework. Wednesday, we have a food chain web stations. Thursday, practice questions. And Friday, we have no school. Let's review. This is your ecosystems worksheet. The answers are below, so go ahead and pause the video, check your answers that you should have worked on and chosen the most appropriate vocabulary. Also, make sure you watch this reintroduction to wolves video. It's pretty cool. Our essential question for this week is, what happens to organisms if their environment changes? The objective is, I can describe the flow of energy through a food chain and food web. I will listen and take notes about food chains and food webs. Your activity for this week is a producer, consumer, and decomposer sort. So your instructions are to look at the pictures that you have on the picture slides in your Google assignment. Decide whether each organism in the food web is a producer, consumer, or decomposer. After deciding what your picture is, put your picture in the correct section on the class producer, consumer, and decomposer sort. Click on each picture, then copy and paste it into the correct category. So, in your Google assignment on Schoology, you will have an assignment. You will see 30 pictures, and you will click on the picture, copy, and paste it into the correct category. It might be a producer, it might be a consumer, or a decomposer. That is your activity for the week. Today, we are talking about food webs. Organisms are living things. Producers create their own energy and consumers eat to get energy. Those are two types of organisms. Our food web vocabulary: a producer is an organism that creates its own energy. A consumer is an organism that must eat to get energy. Types of consumers. So a consumer, again, has to eat in order to get energy. There are three types. We have herbivores, which eat plants only, carnivores, which eat animals only, and omnivores, which eat animals and plants. An herbivore, again, eats plants only. An example would be a zebra. A carnivore eats animals only. An example would be a fox. An omnivore is an animal that eats plants and animals, so we have a monkey as our example. This is a decomposer, which breaks down dead organisms and returns nutrients to the soil. An example would be a mushroom. A scavenger eats animals that are already dead. That is a picture of a crab. We have predators and prey. Predators is an organism that hunts and feeds on another organism. Example, tiger. Prey is an organism that is hunted and killed by another for food. That's a picture of a bunny. Here's our forest food chain. The arrows in the food chain right here represent the transfer of energy. Energy for a food chain begins with the sun. So we have the sun. Our arrows are transferring energy through the organisms. Plants get energy from the sun. The oak tree that made the acorn is a producer. This is an oak tree. This is a producer. The squirrel gets energy from the acorn. The squirrel is a consumer. Here's our squirrel. This is a consumer. Ocean food chain. What does this food chain show? What do you guys think this food chain is showing right now? This food chain is showing algae transferring energy to krill, transferring energy to a penguin, to a whale. We have food webs. When you combine food chains, you can create a food web. Be careful to make sure that the flow of energy is accurate. That is represented by those arrows. Here's another ocean food web. What do you guys see? What are some observations that you may see? We have some plankton. We have two arrows flowing from the plankton, one to fish, one to krill. We also have algae flowing to krill. And then krill, we have two arrows flowing to consumers. What would happen if plankton were eliminated from this food web? So take a minute to think what you think would happen if plankton were to be removed from this food web. Fish would lose their food source. Krill would rely more on eating algae. So if we removed this plankton, our fish would have nothing to eat. Our krill would have to mostly rely on algae because they no longer can eat plankton. So if we removed plankton from this food web, it would be very critical. What would happen if krill were eliminated from this food web? Take a moment to think what would happen if we removed krill from this food web. Algae would become more plentiful. Penguins would lose one food source. So if we removed krill, then there would be much more algae in the ocean because krill is not eating it anymore. And the penguins would lose their one food source because remember, this is our flow of energy. If we lose krill, then the penguins have no food. These are the answers to your note sheet, so take a moment to check those. Let's practice. How many producers are there? How many producers do you guys see? How many organisms depend on the frog as food? So let's look at our frog. Our frog's right here. How many organisms depend on the frog as food? So let's look. Where are our arrows flowing? The owl relies on the frogs, and the snake relies on frogs as food. How many organisms depend on the rabbit as food? So let's find our rabbit. Over here, here's our rabbit. How many organisms depend on the rabbit as food? So let's look where our arrows are pointing. We have one pointing at snakes, which means snakes rely on rabbits for food, and also foxes rely on rabbits as food. Which organism eats the greatest variety? So let's look at the organism that has the most variety in its food, which means the animal that has the most arrows pointing at it. So our fox eats mice, eats squirrels, eats rabbits. Let's practice again. Ducks and snails often eat grass and algae in freshwater ponds. The snails are eaten by mice and ducks. Foxes prefer to eat mice, but will eat a duck if the opportunity arises. Which food chain below is illustrated? Without looking at the answer choices, what do you think the food chain would look like? Take a moment to answer this question. This is a practice star question. So, if the snails are eaten by mice and ducks, foxes prefer to eat mice, but will eat a duck if the opportunity arises. We need to find a food chain below where the snails are eaten by the mice and ducks. So, that would be A, because the snails are getting eaten by the mice. But the foxes prefer to eat mice, so the foxes is eating the mice. All right, that's all we have today, guys.